I turn to André. You have the floor.
I'll make a brief presentation on some research we did at the Louis Bachelier Institute on what we call the intermingling of geostrategy, geopolitics, and finance, its consequences, and where it's going. Of course, the sanctions were applied by using the dollar, and it was applied to banks because banks who used the dollar in any way could face very heavy fines, which in some cases could go all the way to making the bank insolvent. Even the Chinese banks have been very careful not to use the dollar. The second aspect of the sanctions was on the financial infrastructures. The main one which is affected, is SWIFT. And of course, China and India and Russia have tried to create systems which go around SWIFT. So one of the, what made that possible, which is that the dollar remained by far the main trade instrument with money to be used in trade. The efforts of China to use the renminbi indeed limited to some extent the use of the dollar. But if you look at the numbers, the dollar is still by far the main instrument, the main currency, which is used in trade. In the same way, in capital markets, the US capital markets today represent in volume the same amount as the sum of the 10 next capital markets in the world. If you add up the UK, the China, France, the 10 next capital markets, you come to the level of the US capital markets value. So the US remains a leading financial power, and this is going to last for some time. So we look at the trends. Well, of course, in the central bank reserves, the gold is increasing. There is a small portion of euros which is maintained. Still, again, the dollar is the number one reserve in central banks, even if it's slightly less than in the past. So the consequences of the sanctions will be felt in the structure of trade, as Sébastien Jean mentioned. Of course, the new channels which have been developed over the time to get around the sanctions are operating very well. We know about that. It's true in oil and gas. It's true in components, in almost every area. We have new channels of trade which has been developing. Now, as again Sébastien mentioned in his presentation yesterday, there is no such thing as deglobalization. There is a change in the volume of trade, in the channels of trade, but the overall volume of international trade has not been dramatically reduced. So the conclusion of this analysis was that the US remains the leading it is obvious, but it's been substantiated by the numbers, remains the leading financial power in the world by long distance, considering the rest of it. And the dollar will remain as the main tool of geopolitics for the US. I was very brief, let me make a quick mention of the euro. The euro is still an important currency. There have been two reports I would like to mention, which were published over the last 2 months. One by Mario Draghi, which very few people have read, certainly not the politicians, where he stressed that there is a huge amount of savings in Europe, which should be mobilized by European bond issues. It's an unlikely event, but it would change the picture dramatically if it happens. There is also a report by Christian Noyer for the formerly of the Banque de France on the capital markets in Europe. And again, there is a lot of work to be done, which is not being done right now, to make to unify the capital markets in Europe and to take advantage of the still important position of the euro. This could happen. It's unlikely in the short term, but it could change the picture slightly. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, André. Again, you are alluding to issues that we will discuss, it seems to me, notably the reserve assets and the size of capital market.